Okay, great. This is looking really good. I just have a few real small notes for you as you're kind of taking this into spline. So for this very first pose, I think you can get a little flatter with your brows. I'm just kind of reacting to sort of seeing these two lines kind of intersecting, and it just feels a little distracting. I think you can just get a slightly simpler shape, just a little bit round, but almost kind of a straight line, just sort of about right like that, just to sort of simplify that kind of eye shape. On your mouth, something a little similar too, like I kind of feel like this area right here is protruding just a little bit too far. So I'd say maybe just get a slightly flatter shape and just a little bit more of a kind of like a simple shape, just to sort of encourage the fact that kind of these facial features are round and dimensional, but nothing that feels like they're kind of sticking out too far. I think the brows are looking good. I think you can just sort of maybe work on kind of hiding that area of the ring slightly more, just because it's feeling a little distracting, and maybe just kind of getting the ring right about there, kind of out there. So this way it doesn't really feel like it's a part of the eye. It just kind of has a little bit of flow sort of extending beyond that area. So if I just draw this ring, it'll be kind of something a little bit more like that, so it doesn't go as far down there. With the brows too, you may want to get a slight bit of those three graphic lines that I'm always nagging you guys about, just to sort of kind of supplement kind of the shape that you're doing. Like it's there, but I think you could, especially sort of in kind of the outer edge of the brow, I think you could maybe just sort of bring down that corner just a little bit to bring it a little bit closer to the ring, and just to sort of get that shape just a little bit more readable. And then kind of when you're raising up here with the head, it'd be really nice just to make sure that the neck feels involved in any head movement, not just up and down, but a little bit correcting left and right too, just because this is feeling a little too isolated to the head movement and the body movement. So just really make sure that there's a neck move that sort of corresponds there. I think this is looking really good. I think you can get just a little bit more separation from the ring and the eye. Like right now it kind of feels like they're right on top of each other. So just a little bit more separation, and again, maybe just sort of bringing down that edge just a little bit, so this way you can see just a little bit more of that kind of corner on the brow, just to sort of exaggerate kind of the shape that you actually have. And then here again, like I think the ring is just feeling a little too droopy. So I think part of it, again, is just sort of that that distance right here, sort of in between kind of the brow fat and kind of the corner of the eyebrow. So if you got the brow a little bit more like that. So I kind of started to notice I was giving you sort of the overall same note with the brows. So I just went in and kind of resculpted them. So it's mainly just about kind of getting that ring just a little bit separated from kind of the eyelids themselves, and just kind of making sure that this brow corner just has a slight bit more definition, so this way you can just get a little bit more readability. You can kind of see here, like kind of when I just sort of look at them side by side, this just starts to feel kind of like flat kind of in this area, so you sort of lose that three graphic line kind of nature. And by just kind of having a lot of distance between kind of that brow area and the ring, it just starts to sort of feel a little blobby kind of through there, so you kind of start to lose definition. Same thing kind of when you have the brows down and you still see just a little bit of kind of that area right underneath the brow there. It doesn't quite feel like the brow is coming down as much, and it also doesn't feel like the brow is actually coming forward the way that the brow does when the brow really comes down like that. The other note that I tweaked just a little bit was I just reduced sort of this corner of the mouth a little bit, and I just kind of brought up the lower lip just a slight bit, just to kind of reinforce a little bit more sort of compression in the mouth. And so this way there wasn't quite as much kind of an M shape to the mouth there. Not a lot, like very, very subtly. But just a little bit more, just to sort of enhance kind of the feeling that the lips are actually sort of pressing together. Okay, back to your QuickTime. So I think this is looking good too, but I think sort of the same note kind of with the rings. Like it sort of feels like the rings are sort of going right into the eyes here. So I'm just going to resculpt this one in Maya too. So here again, just sort of slight adjustments. So I just kind of wanted to make sure that the ring felt a little bit outside of kind of the eye there. So it didn't really feel like kind of their lines are really feeling parallel. Like especially kind of right in here and here. I wanted to make sure that those lines would kind of feel like they would begin to connect, and then kind of on the other side that they would kind of cascade away from each other. And then I just kind of wanted to make sure that the lid just felt a little bit more open to sort of correspond with kind of that the brow is actually up. And I feel like Ray feels a little bit better with flatter brows than kind of the round brows, just because he's got such a big forehead. The rounded brows kind of feel like they sort of conflict the design. So when they're raised up, I just kind of like to just sort of flatten them out a little bit. But one thing that I like to play with is just the contrast of them, and actually kind of making sure that they actually slide along the path of the skull, and they really separate as they raise up. You know, here it kind of feels like they're still a little bit bunched in, and just kind of like with the rings and the eyes and the brows, you kind of have a lot of really round shapes, so you don't really have a lot of contrast. You just kind of have these same sort of similar kind of curves, and everything just sort of feels a little bit too similar, so everything just kind of feels a little kind of lost. Whereas here you get a little bit more contrast. You get those lines that sort of cascade away from each other, and you get a little bit more contrast in the straighter brows. So I went in and I made another adjustment to the rings here, and before you could kind of see that this area was getting a little flat, and the line was actually getting a little bit too thin. By just sort of going in and sort of pushing it a little bit more, I'm still able to sort of get that curvature correct. It's a bad drawing. That curvature correct, but without kind of losing sort of that kind of soft kind of feeling. So just sort of make sure that when you're actually sculpting your rings that you don't thin that area out too much, and you still sort of keep it like a dimensional skull socket and not something that ever feels like a wrinkle or a crease in the geometry. So here again, sort of that same overall note, just kind of simplifying the ring a little bit and kind of improving that sort of distance right there. But also just sort of felt like this was just getting a little too flat. So maybe sort of push that ring control, or actually it's sort of that double circle control, maybe push it forward or back in Translate Z just to kind of soften that line a little. And here when you're bringing kind of the eyes down, it'd be nice if the ring sort of comes down just a little bit with it as well, and actually the lower ring as well, because right now it's feeling like it's isolated to just the lids. It also would be nice if you start to get a hint of sort of the fact that the eye is a round object and a dimensional object. So this way you actually change kind of the overall line of the lid, just flattening it just a little bit and then rounding out the bottom lid just slightly more. This way it feels like it's really kind of coming forward. And here when you're bringing down the brows, it feels a little unlike the muscles, because you're actually sort of bringing down sort of the corners here, and it should really kind of feel more like just there's a little bit of elasticity to the skin. So just kind of the middle of the brows are actually sort of being brought down with the lids when the eyes actually close. Same thing with the rings. And if anything, kind of this area would actually be the area that moves the least, not the most. Also, when you're closing your eyes here, they're getting fairly angular, especially kind of on that side. So I'd kind of just go in and maybe bring the lower lids a little up to sort of meet the top lids. So this way you don't kind of feel like the eye feels like the lid is really traveling a long distance kind of right there to there. But something just a little bit rounder and a little bit flatter. Maybe just something kind of like a line, a bit more like that. And then on this very last expression, I think you're just getting a little too complicated kind of in your lids right there. I think again you just kind of want to simplify this into sort of just a nice simple round curve, and kind of nothing that really feels like there's too much complication kind of in that shape. And again, same notes kind of on the ring and on kind of that distance of the brow and the eye ring. But cool. Yeah, I think overall it's really just kind of about improving a little bit of that area kind of right underneath the brow. But I think you're actually really close, and especially you're in a good spot just kind of with how much time you have left. Just on the body, just really make sure that you really feel like the neck and the head are a unit working together, and that the body is kind of part of these movements. And then just kind of keep going and keep finessing these shapes. But I think you're really getting close, and you're really kind of finding a good on-model and clear expression for Ray.